Okay, everybody, let's get this thing started. Is everybody ready? I see a bunch of you in there. I see a couple more piling in. We'll let everybody get in. Got some busy folks I see coming in. Got a good crowd in here. I recognize some names. Excellent. Excellent. All right, let's go ahead and kick this thing off. You're all here. You're all busy people. You've all got a lot going on. I'm not gonna waste too much of your time. We're all here, hopefully, for an advanced SharePoint developer session. I hope you've all got Visual Studio open. Nah, I'm kidding. This is all for us IT pros. This is upgrading to SharePoint 2016 with as little pain as possible. I don't even know what Visual Studio is, to be real honest. I heard that someplace. One of my developer buddies, Tony, was talking about it. So for the next hour and a half, we'll see how it goes. We're going to be talking about upgrading to SharePoint 2016. Now, I can't see normally when I do these kind of presentations. I'm in a room. I get to talk to you folks, look you in the eye, make fun of the people that are sleeping. These are some of the things I can't do today. But one of the things that I like to do is kind of get an idea who is upgrading to SharePoint 2016, like the title card says, and who is upgrading to SharePoint 2013. I know there's still a lot of SharePoint 2010 out there. This session will be a lot about 2013, and Michael Buckingham in the chat room put 2016 in there, so that's a good idea. You can put it in there. I will be focusing a lot on 2016, but if you have questions about 2013, I have upgraded a farm to SharePoint 2013 a time or two, so don't be afraid to throw those questions out, and I will do what I can to answer them, but we will hit the 2016 stuff pretty hard. All right, now this is my favorite slide in the whole deck. It is all downhill from here. The rest of the slides are all kind of anticlimactic after this one. This is my vanity slide, and I originally had a caricature drawn there for my picture, but I'm like, you know, I don't know a lot of you folks, so I decided I'd go ahead and put a picture. So I took this picture this morning. This was after my first cup of coffee. I'm now on a couple of them, so I've got a little more energy, a little more juice. But who am I? Who is Todd Klindt? Well, I'm a SharePoint MVP. I've been a SharePoint person, a SharePoint guy for like the last 13 years. It's been what I do. So I kind of stumbled into SharePoint. I used to be an IT pro. I was an administrator, like I imagine a lot of you are, and I did Windows and SQL Exchange and all that. And about 13 years ago, my boss needed somebody to put a web page together that had a bunch of things about our servers, and it had to look good, and it had to function, and people had to be able to sort and filter. And there was just no way I was going to be able to do all that. So I was going to have to do my resume and all that, and get a new job, maybe, you know, flip burgers or dig ditches or something. And then the Office XP CD was sitting there, and I stuck it in. It had a demo of SharePoint Team Services 2001, and I thought, what the heck, and I installed it, and I've been a SharePoint guy ever since. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been doing SharePoint nonstop for over a decade now. I do some speaking. I've spoken all over. I've spoken in Europe, in the U.S., and have had a pretty good run with that. Do some writing, so we got a question in the chat room if I'm planning on doing a SharePoint 2016 administration book. So Pritton has apparently bought my 2010 and 2013 books. There are no plans right now to do a 2016 book. Writing books is a lot of work, a whole lot of work, and in this day and age, most people get stuff from blogs and things like that, so I don't know that we're going to do one of those. But thanks for asking. You're my favorite right now. Until somebody asks a different question, you're my favorite. So, and do consulting. A lot of these stories that you're going to hear today, and a lot of the things I talked about, are things that I screwed up myself. I make a lot of mistakes. I learned the hard way. So we're going to hear a lot of fun stories about things that I've screwed up. So hopefully you guys will be smarter than me and learn from my mistakes. I do have a blog. You can find me at toddklindt.com, and then the blogging itself is at toddklindt.com/blog, and I do some podcasting. I do some other stuff. You can find out about me there. I work for a hosting company in the U.S. called Rackspace. Home office is in San Antonio, Texas. I live in Iowa. I live in Ames, Iowa, and I work from home. But Rackspace is in Texas. We do SharePoint hosting and all kinds of other Microsoft-y things. So you can go to rackspace.com or sharepoint.rackspace.com, find out about wondrous products. You can also email me, todd.klindt@rackspace.com. or hit me up on Twitter at Todd Klindt. Either way, you feel free to shoot me your questions. The shorter the question, the better chance you have of getting an answer or even a right one. So if I get an email that says, hey, can you architect my farm for me? The answer to that is probably no. But if you've got a question like, hey, I can't decide, should I have 2 search servers or 3 search servers? I got this kind of load. That kind of thing I'm happy to help out with. But by all means, reach out to me. I'm a pretty friendly guy, and I would love to chat with you. And then if you are not already sick of the sound of my voice, every Monday at 4 p.m. Central Time in the U.S., so UTC -5, I do a live podcast, and then it's also out of my blog, so you can catch a recording. But I've got a chat room in Slack, and people heckle me, and it's a good time for everybody. But I talk about things that I've done the previous week and all that. So it's a good time. I recommend it. So as a professional public speaker, despite what the last 10 minutes have probably suggested, we're required contractually to have agenda slides. So here's my agenda slide. We're going to talk about upgrade methods. This deck, I pulled some slides from my 2013 deck, and this was before the 2016 stuff was a focus, so that's why that's called out specifically. But we're just going to talk about upgrade and take your questions. So let's dig in. All right, so like I said, I have been a SharePoint guy for a while, and as with anybody who's old, we get nostalgic and all that. And when I was putting this deck together originally, I thought, upgrade has progressed so much. I've upgraded from every version of SharePoint to the next version of SharePoint. And I was just kind of looking back at how it's changed. And when we upgraded from SharePoint 2003 to SharePoint 2007, so this was back in the dark ages when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and SharePoint was still on stone tablets at that point. We had 3 methods. We could do a gradual upgrade, a database attach, or an in-place upgrade. And I, as a SharePoint guy, I always use gradual. So the in-place upgrade method meant you've got a SharePoint 2003 server, you slap the SharePoint 2007 CD in the drive, because yes, we still actually did use servers, physical boxes, and you did actually install SharePoint on CD. It was wondrous times. But you did an in-place upgrade, and if that upgrade failed for any reason, there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news was there was no way to recover from that failed upgrade. The good news was you didn't have to figure out what to do next because your only options were fdisk and restore. And so that was an option that we didn't normally take, the in-place upgrade. The database attach was there, but that meant we needed a separate 2007 farm. And again, this was back in the days when we still did everything with physical servers, and people just didn't have space for that. So we never did database attach. We always did gradual upgrade, and that was where we could have 2007 and 2003 installed on the same server at the same time, and then we would gradually move site collections and upgrade them. And if something went crazy with one of the site collections, then we would just unupgrade it and try to fix it and upgrade it again. Gradual upgrade was what I used in 99% of all of my 2003 2007 upgrades, and we made fun of the people that did the other methods. It was a great time. And then SharePoint 2010 came out. And when Microsoft announced SharePoint 2010, they said, yeah, we've got a lot of great things here, but because of testing and resources and things like that, we've taken out one of the upgrade methods. And it was the one that I used all the time. Imagine the big sad face I had when I saw that. They said, but we've got good news. We have fixed in-place upgrade. And so now if in-place upgrade fails, you could recover from it. And we took out some of the ridiculous arbitrary links, things like that. And so it's got a much better chance of actually succeeding. And so I said, okay, well, that's not a horrible idea. We can maybe take a look at that. VMs, virtualization, was starting to become a thing, and that definitely changed how we looked at upgrades, because now we could spin up another farm in our virtualization environment and pull some resources from our production farm, do the database attach method, and then spin down those old resources and just kind of shuffle things around. But it was kind of weird times, but in-place upgrade had some good things, and we checked it out. And then SharePoint 2013 came out, and they took out the in-place upgrade method. And so that was easy, because then we had very little decision making to make on how we were going to upgrade. It was database attach or database attach, and that was really all we had. And it worked out pretty well. Again, we're in virtualization, full bore now. Everybody's virtualizing everything, and so shuffling those resources around was not a problem, and kind of got attached to that. And again, the reason Microsoft did this was not to be bad people, not because they're mean and they want bad things for us, but because everything they don't have to test means they can do other things better. So if they don't have to test in-place upgrade, then they can make database attach a little better, and that's kind of why they did that. But again, as a SharePoint guy who's seen this happen, as I've been watching these upgrade methods fail away, I ask myself, every time we get a new version of SharePoint, we lose an upgrade method. What in the world is going to happen when 2016 comes out? It was a big question, and I did, there we go, I automated or animated the slide. So the good news is when we go from 2013 to 2016, it's still the database attach method. So there's a couple of key takeaways from this slide deck. If you've got a busy morning and you don't know what to do and you weren't sure how you were going to upgrade to 2013, this is the slide. Going from 2013 to 2016 with out-of-the-box tools, you've got one option, and that option is database attach. So that's good and that's bad, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time in this session kind of talking about that and architecture things and stuff like that. But that's the big one. Now, the elephant in the room is third-party tools, and I'm going to spend some more time later on about talking about that, but that is also something that you need to have in your arsenal. Another thing you need to have that you need to be ready to do is use the out-of-the-box tools. You know, you're going to be doing your database attaches, but also think about when third-party tools make sense, which third-party tools make sense, and all of that. All right, so now on to the guts. Now on to some just blasting data at you and talking about upgrades and letting you know what upgrade options we have. All right, so one question that always comes up is how do I skip versions? So SharePoint has always only upgraded from N-1. You've always only been able to upgrade SharePoint from the previous version. So when SharePoint 2007 came out, you couldn't upgrade from 2001. You had to be on 2003, so on and so forth, hither and yon. So if you're on 2007 now, and every time I do this session in person, I have a, at the beginning I told you I do kind of a survey. There's always at least one person that's running 2007. And I'm going to tell you that in the last year, there's been somebody who's had 2003 in production, 13 years old. They've had it out there. So it's not a silly question. I get it all the time. If you have 2007 and you want to go to 2016 with out-of-the-box tools, here is your path. There are no shortcuts. So you got to go to 2010, 2013, 2016. So we've got some people in the chat room now that, yep, they've got 2003 also. Yeah, it's crazy. And, once SharePoint gets in place and you get it the way you want it, you're afraid to touch it. And I know how that is. So the other thing is buy a third-party tool. So the top 4 lines here are all about the out-of-the-box tools. That's the database attached, the in-place upgrades, and all that. But they only go N-1, so you can only take one step at a time. But third-party tools, because they kind of act like clients, they kind of sit off of the server. They let you skip versions. And the other good thing is if you're running 2003 or 2007, or maybe even 2010, there's chances that you're going to need to fix some sins of the past also, and I'm going to talk about that a little later. But the third-party tools let you do that, and the older your existing version of SharePoint is, the more likely you have some of that to do. So definitely take a look at those third-party tools. And again, we'll chat about that on a later slide. In the chat room, Shruti, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce your name. I know that everybody likes, what's that Dale Carnegie said, the sweetest sound to any person is the sound of their own name. So I'm going to try to pronounce your name, but I apologize 100 times in advance if I mispronounce it. Shruti asked, is it possible to in-place upgrade from 2013 to 2016? You cannot. If you try to install 2016 on a server that has 2013 installed on it, it will put up its hand. It will not let you install it. You have to do an in-place upgrade, or you cannot do an in-place upgrade. You have to do a database attach. So let me tag that one in the chat room. So, and then we've got another one. If you do an upgrade from 2010 or from 2007, what happens with deprecated features in the resulting 2016 farm? Solveig, I hope I pronounced your name right there. That one, we're going to talk about that a little more in depth later on, what to do with those features and solutions and all of that. Deprecated is a big word that means will probably go away at some point in the future. It does not mean will go away in the next version. And so this is one of those cases where you need to do some testing. There's going to be some things that will work, some things that were deprecated in old versions, but they still work 2 or 3 versions out. It's just that's one of Microsoft's ways of telling you not to do the thing. Sandbox Solutions is a great example of that. So you're going to want to do some testing and find out what happens. Goodness sakes, you're going to want to test this. You're already going to test it anyway, so that's one of the things to test. But the other thing that I'm going to tell you is that when you move from version to version, the app development models have changed dramatically from version to version, and certainly from 2 or 3 versions out. And so when you're doing your upgrade, you have a good opportunity to look at your apps that you've developed, and instead of just upgrading them, even if they do work, maybe looking at things and seeing if it's still the best to do it that way. Or if you even need it at all. Maybe you've got some kind of feature that you added in 2007 that 2016 does out of the box now, so you may not have to do it. Ashish is asking, are there any major concerns during in-place upgrade? Currently we're doing a test on 3 servers, and which license to use? Well, the good news about the licensing is every version of SharePoint has a demo license, so you can get like a 6-month or 180-day trial. So you don't have to worry about burning a license or which license to use or anything like that, because there are trial versions out there, so you don't have to sweat that. Major concerns, so if you're doing an in-place, the last version you could do an in-place was 2007 to 2010, so you're a ways back if you're doing an in-place. And if you're going to 2013, I guess I would tell you not to spin your cycles or use energy on going from 2007 to 2010. If you can swing it and if it makes sense, use a third-party tool, and then you can just jump right to 2007 to 2016. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. And I apologize in advance for mispronouncing your name. Zvonimir is asking, I have MOS 2007 migrated to SharePoint 2013 through 2010, so you've done this dance before. Good. And it's got FBA on an extended website. Migrated version is still on Windows authentication. Can I have FBA on extended web app with Windows Classic authentication on primary? In 2016, I believe that you can, and I may have hidden the slide, Zvonimir, but there is a way to create a classic web app from PowerShell, and that might be the way that gets you around that. What I would tell you, though, and this is a lot like I said for that development question a couple questions ago, this is a good time when you were in 2007 using forms-based authentication and all that was kind of an afterthought. It kind of felt like they bolted it on at the end and your options weren't as good. Now is a good time to look at how 2016 does authentication and see if maybe there's a better way to do the thing that you're doing, because there might be. You were kind of forced to do a cruddy thing in 2007, and maybe in 2016 there's a better way to do it. So before you work down this road of mouse traps and strings and marbles and all that to get it all to work, kind of take a step back and see if maybe 2016 will do it better for you. All right, Michael is asking, have I tried it with, or he's asking Zvonimir, has he tried it with Azure AD Reverse Proxy? Michael, I like the way that you think. I was absolutely not going to cover this in this this webinar, but this is a good topic to cover. For those of you that haven't seen it yet, Azure AD Reverse Proxy, or Azure AD Application Proxy, I think is the formal name for it, is a way to host internal applications externally on the internet, and you do it through Azure Active Directory and Azure Active Directory accounts. So what Michael's thinking, and I like the way that he thinks, is have your 2016 farm internal, and then use Azure Active Directory and publish it out that way, and then you can use Azure Active Directory, can use external usernames and passwords to do that. So it looks like for Zvonimir that might not work. So Zvonimir, you might have to reach out to me privately about this one, but we'll see if we can figure something out. I can try some stuff and see. All right, next slide. So here I've just kind of got some bullet points to talk about 2016. Somebody asked in the chat room if I'm going to make these slides available to you. Absolutely, I will make these available to you. I can get them to Tony or something. I'm not even sure how to get them out to you. Again, I'm at Todd Klindt on Twitter. My blog is toddklindt.com. Reach out to me if you want the slides. I'm happy to get them to you in some form or fashion. So if you're feverishly scribbling down notes, the other thing that Tony told me before this thing started, first he told me don't screw up and embarrass me, but then the next thing he told me was that this is being recorded, so you can go back if there's pieces that you thought you might miss, you can go back and grab those. All right, here are some just kind of random 2016 notes that we can talk about. The upgrade process from 2013 to 2010 is a lot like 2010 to 2013. So if you've already done an upgrade and worked through how it works with, the database attach and the different farms and authentication changing a little bit, things like that. If you've already done that once with going from 2010 to 2013, the good news is you've got a lot figured out going from 2013 to 2016. So keep that in mind. A few changes, we're going to talk about those later, but for the most part, same general strategy. Again, the process we're going to use is database attach, and I've got some later slides that go through that a little bit more, but your path is clear. It's database attach. One big change in SharePoint 2016, something that Microsoft has spoken a lot about, one of their big exciting things, is this idea of min role. This idea that when you add a server to a farm, not when you install the server, not when you lay the binaries down, but when you join the SharePoint farm, there is a thing that you can do called min role, where you tell the server what it's going to be doing. And you can say there's going to be a search server, it's going to be a web front end, whatever. You give the server its role, and SharePoint will run timer jobs that make sure the minimum number of service instances run on that server to do the things that it's supposed to do. So there's a whole bunch of benefits to this. Number one, like the name suggests, min role. SharePoint is going to go through periodically via timer job, and it is going to shut off extraneous things running on your server. And this gives you a couple of benefits. Number one, it gives you more resources to do the thing you want SharePoint to really do, so search or whatever. It also reduces the attack vectors on your farm, so there's no code running that will, people can exploit or whatever that you don't mean. It will only run the things that you tell it to run via whichever role you choose, and there's defined roles and all that. The other good part of min role is if you tell SharePoint you're going to be a web server, if somehow that web application role, that service instance gets shut off, SharePoint will turn it back on for you. If it knows what that server is supposed to do, it will try to keep it in tip-top shape, get it down to a good fighting weight, but keep it in shape to do the thing that you want it to do. So as you're architecting your 2016 farm, take a step back and look at min role. Now, because of how min role works and because of another thing called zero downtime patching, you may end up having to kind of re-architect things. So when you move from any version of SharePoint to the next version, or probably any version of anything to the next version, chances are it's going to take a little more resources. I like to refer to this as the pound of flesh that Microsoft wants. So every time they come out with a new version of SharePoint, they're all very proud and very happy, and they show us their baby, they put it out there, and then immediately we start picking it apart and talk about the things that it doesn't do. We call their baby ugly. And so they get these list of things that the customers are screaming for, and a lot of times the next version of SharePoint has them. But when that next version comes out, we have to pay our pound of flesh. So SharePoint 2016 does more things than SharePoint 2013 does, but it requires more resources to do them. It requires more RAM, faster CPUs, things like that. And so because of that, you may have to upgrade your hardware a little bit. And a lot of that will have to do with how hard your 2013 farm is working now. If you've got 3 or 4 servers now, and at the height of the day, if it is as busy as it's ever going to be, and your servers are sitting at 10 or 15% CPU and maybe half the RAM used, you maybe won't need to add more servers to 2016 to get the same performance. But if you've got some servers and they're constantly at 50, 60%, then chances are you might have to upgrade them a little bit. The other thing to keep in mind with that is you're going to be at odds with your management and your virtualization team around this. Their jobs are different than your jobs, and their goals are different than your goals. And so your virtualization team looks at all of your servers, and they, you've got 5 or 6 SharePoint servers, and they're going to try to steal gigs of RAM from you here and there. Because if they can steal a gig of RAM from 6 of your servers, then that means they can put another server out there in that virtualization host. And that's what they do. They try to make the most efficient use of their the resources. And your boss is the same way. He's got a budget, and there's chargebacks and all that. So you need to be able to stand your ground and define these things and do some homework on that. So the main thing with that is don't just copy your SharePoint 2013 farm topology. The other thing about MinRoll is if you're going to do the zero downtime patching, the way Microsoft has set that up, in reality what that is, zero downtime patching, is a very sexy name, but in reality what it means, the trick behind the curtain, is that the config database doesn't get locked when you apply a patch, when you run the config wizard. That's really what's going on. So in order for zero downtime patching to work, you have to have at least 2 of everything. And so that means 2 web front ends, 2 search servers, and if you don't have that now, you're going to have more of those. And right now, to have a fully redundant, zero downtime, patchable SharePoint 2016 farm that uses MinRoll, you need 8 servers, 2 of each of the roles. So as you're planning your topology out, keep that in mind. We've got a few questions jump in. Let's see what happens. So one of them is from Tony Rockwell. Hey, I know you. Is it possible to connect a 2016 farm to Office Web Apps 2013 for Excel services? Tony, I don't know. That is a good thing to test. Later down this, we've got some differences in OWA 2013 and 2016, and so maybe that will answer your question, and we can go from there. Scott Giesbrecht asks, is workflow also a separate server in SharePoint 2016? For the non-SharePoint 2010 workflows, yes. So you still have the workflow management server that sits out externally. Ian Murphy asks, hi Todd. Hi Ian. Can you mix the custom role with other roles, like use the search role for a server, then build another server using the custom role? Yes, you can mix and match your roles in the farm. And again, the thing about this is it is a server setting when you add it to the farm, and you can have multiple, you can have customs or whatever. You can also change the role down the road. So as your farm is growing out, you can, when you add a server to the farm, you can say you're going to be a search server, and then a month later you can go back and say it's going to be a web server, whatever. Karthik is asking, are they going to release service packs for SharePoint 2016? I assume they're going to, or 2013. They've done the one. I think they're going to probably continue that, but I don't know. I would think they would. Let's add that out. We answered that one. We answered that one. We answered that one. Okay. It's reordering the questions for me, and that's not very helpful. Okay, so Davender, this is a good one. We haven't talked about this one. Davender's asking, how difficult is it to perform an offline installation, given that most of the prereqs need internet connections? So there is a way. I don't have it handy, but if you ping me or whatever, Davender, I'm happy to help you out. There are a number of ways to download all of the prereqs offline, so you absolutely, positively can do a completely offline installation of SharePoint 2016. So let me do that. And I know some folks that do that all the time. Okay, so if I'm scrolling through here. grab some questions. All right, let's move on. Oh boy, there's a bunch of them in there. Let's look at that. So Joe Bezic, you've got a question about min-roll and search. I will answer that in a moment. I'm building anticipation. Kevin Graham, how you doing? He says, if I'm planning a 2010 to 2013 upgrade with an eye to 2016, is there a topology we should do with 2013 to make 2016 easier? Not really. I think 2013 and 2016 are similar enough. It's not crazy big architectural differences. One thing I will say, Kevin, is I think you are wise to not think about skipping 2013 and jump right to 2016, because that never happens as quickly as you want, and then you get stuck on things like 2010. So I know that's a good idea for you. So Keith is asking, for a small 2-server farm with a SQL server and a SharePoint 2016 server, do you simply select web front end for the min-roll selection? If you have a single SharePoint server, Keith, I think you're going to want to use the custom min-roll and then just turn all the stuff on. If you use a web, then it's going to shut everything off that's not web, and I think that's going to make you sad. Matthew is saying that min-roll is a requirement for 2016. So on my slide I say don't use a custom roll, and Matthew, that's mostly because I want people to think about min-roll. I want them to think about whether it makes sense. There's inherently, I'm going to tell you, there's inherently nothing wrong with custom. If you're the kind of SharePoint administrator that stays on top of these things, there's inherently nothing wrong with custom roll, but I want you to look at min-roll and see if it makes sense for you. I don't want people to just go, oh, I cannot think about this, and then not, and just pick custom. That's the thing I'm trying to discourage. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. We're plugging along here. If you're moving to SharePoint 2016 and you are upgrading from 2013 that has been upgraded from SharePoint 2010, make sure you find out which site collections you have in 2010 mode and try to get those upgraded in 2013 before you move to 2016. That will make things better for everybody involved. So there's, you can easy get SP site, work compatibility version, blah, blah. There's easy ways to do that, but try to get those upgraded before you go to 2013. One change in the upgrade to 2016 is that site collections are upgraded on attach in 2016. In 2013, they were not. The database was upgraded, but they stayed in 2010 mode. Since the visual difference for your end users is much smaller, going from 2013 to 2016, they've decided to go ahead and just upgrade everything. So beware of that. One change that they've made now is the project server binaries. All the project server functionality is built into SharePoint 2016. There is no separate project server SKU. It's licenses really. So that's something, if you're using project server, you'll have to figure out and do what you're going to do. Tony asked about Excel services. They've made an architectural change in 2016. It's kind of a good idea. In previous versions of SharePoint 2010, 2013, there were two Excel things that you had to deal with. You had Excel services, which debuted in SharePoint 2007, which is the ability to put web parts on a page that did Excel calculations. I didn't see a lot of people use that in production. I saw a lot of, mortgage calculators, all the little demoware that was always out there, but I didn't see a lot of use for that, the Excel services stuff. I also don't do a lot of BI things, so that might be why. But that was one of the Excel things, Excel services built into SharePoint, web parts that had Excel functionality. In 2010, when the Office web apps showed up for the first time, there was also an Excel server. An Excel server is an in-browser version of Excel. So this is the ability to have Excel worksheets in SharePoint, or be able to click an Excel document in a document library and get an Excel instance in your browser. The bad news in 2010 and 2013 was those are handled by two separate functions, and so you had to pick where XLSX files went. Do they go to Excel services to get rendered in the page, or do they get sent to the Office web app servers? And so you kind of had to make that decision, and it was a farm-wide decision, so it was tough. In 2016, Excel services, the in-browser, the web part, Excel stuff, is now done by the Office web app successor, Office Online Servers. So hooray, you don't have to worry about that. You can do both of them. Now, in 2013 and in 2016, the Office Online Servers is a separate server, cannot be installed on SharePoint, has to be installed on a separate server. That's kind of bad news. The good news is that it is a open standard server, and SharePoint is not the only application that uses it. Exchange uses it, Skype for Business uses it, and it is a standard called WOPI, which is one of the most hysterically named standards ever, W-O-P-I, WOPI. And so other companies, other people, I've known Victor Weiland up in Sweden, he wrote a WOPI client for file shares, so you could click a file on a file share and have it pop open in the WOPI browser. That's all out there, so you're going to want to upgrade those. You're going to want to put those out there. If this is, if you didn't do it in 2013, or if you're upgrading from 2007 or 2010 and you're worried about this, if your company is a Microsoft shop, there's a good chance that there is a Office Online Server out there somewhere that your other, the Exchange team is using, something like that. So you're going to want to look at those. It's a pretty big thing. So Max Fritz threw a question in the chat room, and I apologize, I'm kind of getting behind on the questions here. He says, I know a single server isn't supported anymore, but just as for a single team with 20 users, what would you still suggest going to 2 servers? Max single server is still supported, it's just supported differently with different words. So let me put this answer out here. There we go. So what is not supported anymore is the mode where it used to be called a basic install. It was just a horrible idea. I pleaded with my friends at Microsoft for years to take that out of there. But there used to be a way to install SharePoint that would use local accounts and would use a SQL Express instance and just do all manner of bad things. Create a database with GUIDs at the end, and it probably kicked puppies, and it was just a horrible, nasty, terrible thing. And so what Microsoft did with the 2016 version of SharePoint was they included this 2016 single server thing, but it is a single server done correctly. So it doesn't install SQL Express anymore. You have to point to a SQL instance, things like that. So it's still there, Max. Do some Googling, things like that. And it's still possible. So if that makes sense for you, if you can have all your user load on one server, you can probably still do that. Chuck Combs says, hi Todd, thanks for all your help you've given to your blog over the years. Hi Chuck, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad to be able to help. I'm glad my little blog has reached out and touched a few people here and there. Looking to see if there's any other Office web app questions. Custom branding, Shiver. That's scary. Okay. All right. So on to our next slide. Boy, am I way behind on slides. You guys are asking some really good questions, though. This is good stuff. Somebody asked earlier in the questions about search. Here is the thing where we cover search. With SharePoint 2013, Service Pack 1, and then the August 2015 cumulative update, I believe, Microsoft added the ability to have hybrid or cloud search in SharePoint 2013, and then 2016 just out of the box. RTM, RTW, GM, whatever you want to call it, when SharePoint 2016 hit the streets, it came with cloud search. And because I am not paying attention, I will probably use the term cloud search and hybrid search interchangeably. They are the same thing. So what is cloud search? So cloud search is this amazing new functionality that is in addition to regular SharePoint search. So don't think that anything's being taken away. It's not. You can still do all the search things in 2016 that you did in 2013 and 2010 and all of that. This is augmenting it. This is in addition to it. So what can you do? You can create a new search service application. It has to be new. You cannot convert from an on-prem one. You have to create a new search service application, and you tell it, I want it to be a cloud search service application. I want it to be a hybrid. And what this does is this takes the query role and the index role off farm, off of your on-prem server, off of your SharePoint server, and puts it in Office 365. So there are a whole bunch of ramifications for this. This is This is crazy big. So the first thing, so why do you want to do that? The reason that you would want to do that is so that your on-prem and off-prem results end up in the same search results pane. So right now, before all this, we could do federated results. So your on-prem results were ranked and all that kind of stuff, and then your off-prem ones were in this other web part that was kind of on the wrong side of the tracks, and they didn't get, you know, ranked appropriately and all that. So that's one of the things you can do if you've got content in Office 365, in SharePoint Online, and on-prem. This puts everything together in one interface. The other great thing that it does is it affects your hardware topology, but in a good way. Search servers have always been tough to size. For as long as search has been a thing, I've gotten the question, how do I size my search server? How do I size all of this? How big is my search database, my index, going to be compared to my corpus, the amount of text that I have? How much horsepower do I need for this? And the answer to all those questions is very complicated because it depended on what kind of documents you had and how much search people did and all that. And then you had that issue where if you had query servers that were slow and you wanted to add another query server to your farm, well, that query server had to have a copy of the instance or of the index, and then that took drive space, so then you had to figure all that out. So there were a lot of hardware issues to figure out. And now if you use this hybrid search, the query and the index go up into the cloud. So the crawl part still sits on-prem, and the crawl part is the part that goes out and gets documents. And that part still obviously has to happen on-prem, or else you couldn't get the documents. But then instead of indexing them, which is kind of like taking them like a coconut and banging them on a rock and seeing what words are inside, the index process now is out in Office 365, and that's where the documents get indexed and broken open. And then when your users do queries, you got to do some configuration, but the query is actually done in Office 365 as well, so you don't have to worry about keeping a copy of that index locally. Manish is asking, is cloud search possible in SharePoint 2013? Absolutely it is. You need Service Pack 1, and at the minimum you need the August 2015 cumulative update, though. Go to my blog, go to toddklindt.com/SP2013 builds, and you can see all the different builds. That functionality was added in August, but it got broken in a later patch, and so there's some stuff that you need to do, but you absolutely can do that. I also have a blog post on how to set it up, and I don't have that URL handy, but if you go to toddklindt.com, cloud hybrid something, but there's a whole walkthrough of me setting that up in 2013. Matthew Marino is asking, in cloud search, is there an extra charge for the index storage? We're going to talk about that with the licensing. Not really. We'll talk about that at the end here. All right, so from a hardware topology standpoint, SharePoint 2016 hybrid search is good. Licensing. So since the query is happening in Office 365, all of your users have to be in Office 365 and they have to be licensed. Or otherwise, when they try to go to the Office 365 search results page, they can't get in. They can't get access to anything. So that's kind of scary because you probably have to buy a lot of licenses. You got a lot of people in your farm. The good news is, for many, well, for a couple of years now, Microsoft has been selling Office 365 CALs, client access licenses, to people who want on-prem SharePoint, because an Office 365 CAL obviously gives you access to Office 365, but it also gives you access licenses for on-prem SharePoint. So you might not be messing with Office 365 now, but you may accidentally have Office 365 licenses. So talk to your Microsoft rep, your TAM, whoever. You may be licensed for this. But every user that uses SharePoint has to exist in Office 365 and has to be licensed. So with that, you get so much storage per user. So Matthew, your question about is there an extra charge for storage? There is, but it's after many terabytes. It's not as big a deal as I thought it was going to be. So you can check that out. If you can't find the answer to that, hit me up and I will find it for you. I talked to Neil Hodgkinson at Microsoft about this, and I remember coming away from that conversation thinking not a big deal. But if you can't find that answer, email me, todd.klindt@rackspace.com or @ToddKlindt on Twitter. And again, this search service app cannot be converted either way, and so you have to create new. So Victor is asking, so I assume, is the Office 365 license required even if we don't use cloud search and are on-prem? If you're not doing anything in Office 365, you don't need an Office 365 license. And certainly if you're not using the cloud search. If you're using the on-prem search like you did in 2010 and 2007, no Office 365 licenses are required. Manish is asking, is 2016 the last version? Is it all going to be in the cloud? No, Microsoft said they're going to keep cranking out on-prem versions. So I think we're good for a while. We've all got jobs in the future. We're all in good shape. All right. So again, can't be converted. So if you try the cloud hybrid search and find out it's not for you, you have to create an on-prem search, recrawl, all that kind of stuff. All right. Now let's move on. You guys are asking great questions. I'm getting all excited about. So Ryan Ellers, that's a good question. He's saying, can you maintain on-prem indexes for sensitive content and still use cloud search? You can, Ryan, but you end up having two search service applications, and then you need to figure out which is the default for the web app and all of that. So technically, yes, but I think in functionality, once you did it, you would not like it. Now, depending on your security concerns in the U.S., there's things called HIPAA and stuff like that. There are a number of things that Microsoft does to keep the cloud search secure, and that might be enough to make you feel better. Jeremy, thank you very much. So yes, the blog post that I put out on cloud search, which will answer a bunch of these questions, is toddklindt.com/happycssa. Happy Cloud Search Service Application. So thank you to Jeremy Taylor. Hey Jeremy, it's been a while since we talked. Glad to see you're out there. So Jeremy also, Jeremy's a big deal in the SharePoint world, and he's got a free ebook out on somewhere. He'll put the link in here on hybrid installations. So good stuff. So now let's talk about some other search stuff. The stuff we're going to talk about now is applicable for SharePoint 2016, the version that you've all come to know and love, but also for 2013. So if you're looking at doing that dance as well, that's applicable for all of it. So we've talked about content or database attached, but we haven't talked about which databases you can attach. So this is an important slide right here. Which databases can you attach? All of the content databases. Obviously, if you couldn't attach a content database, there wouldn't be a whole lot of point in upgrading. All of your content databases from 2013 attached to 2016. Including your MySite content databases. We're going to cover that a little more heavily in the next slide, but they all come over. Now, what about your service apps? There's a lot of good service app information in your databases. Which ones can you bring over? That list right there. So your BCS, Business Connectivity Services, Managed Metadata, Performance Point, and I'm sorry if you have to do that, a Secure Store, User Profile, Profile Databases, and Search Administration. So let's talk about each of those. BCS, also known as the BDC in 2007, that is where you store credentials for SharePoint to access other places. That comes right over. With all of the service apps, the way that you upgrade is you bring your database over. You take your BCS database or your Secure Store database from 2013, restore it into your 2016 SQL instance. So hopefully you're using different SQL instances for each farm. That is a Todd Klindt approved best practice. The other thing that you're going to want to do is use different service accounts, and that's important because when you bring these databases over, the permissions are part of the backup, and so when you bring your BCS database over into SQL for your 2016 farm, you need to restore it, and then you need to give your 2016 service accounts permission to that database. You absolutely, in every SharePoint farm you ever install ever, you want separate service applications or service accounts. And the reason for that is because it is very easy as you're poking around, especially if you're testing upgrade things. It's very easy to be clicking around in one environment and accidentally find yourself in a different farm, and you don't want to be in that other farm and not know it as a service account or a privileged account and start deleting things. Really bad thing. So We're running a little long today, but I can tell you I have made this exact mistake myself. I was lazy once way back when I was a young, bright-eyed SharePoint administrator. The world was still my oyster. I had a test environment, and I used all the same service accounts in test and in production because I was lazy. I didn't want to redo everything. And I was testing some new software, and it was software that the company I worked for at the time wrote. And I installed it in my test environment with a privileged account. And part of how my software, the software my company wrote, worked is it jumped into the config database and looked at all the server names. And this was with SharePoint 2003, I think, I forget, where you could copy config databases over. But anyway, that installation process running as a privileged account in my test farm found the names of my production SharePoint servers and tried to upgrade them, which was mangling web config files and doing any number of horrible, unholy things. And since that service account was valid in the production farm as well, it did them, and I took production down in the middle of the day and destroyed all of my content databases and my web servers because that upgrade only half worked because it wasn't running correctly. So as you can imagine, that afternoon I got very religious about having different service accounts for all of my farms. And that's important in upgrade because as you bring all these databases over, you need to make sure that you give your new accounts permission. Okay, so for all of these, so the process is you bring your database over, SQL for your SharePoint 2016 farm, you restore it, you re-permission it, you give your new service accounts permission to it, and then you create a new service app of that type. And in the spot, either in the UI or in PowerShell, where you can specify the database name. Normally, you put a database name in there and SharePoint creates a new database for you. But SharePoint is smart enough to go in the background and go, hey, there's already a database here with that name. I'll just go ahead and use that. And it will grab your existing 2013 database and upgrade it for you with no muss, no fuss. And so that's how all of these work. So you just restore the database ahead of time, create the new service application in 2016, give it the 2013 database name, and all just happens. So for BCS, all of your external connections, credentials, and all that, they pop up. For managed metadata, all your data and managed metadata shows up in there. Performance Point, I'll be honest, I've not done a Performance Point upgrade. Performance Point and I just don't get along very well, but that's all documented out there, but I know that will upgrade. Secure Store, that is where you can store credentials for internal stuff. That one you can bring over. Before it will actually work, it will upgrade, but before it will actually work, you need to type in the passphrase, which may be a phrase that you haven't used since you installed SharePoint 2013, but you'll need to know that in 2016. After you create the service app and the database is updated, you'll have to go into that service app and put that password in so it can decrypt that database. User profile, you can bring over your social and your profile databases. You can't bring over your sync database. That's really just scratch information, so there's nothing there anyway. But keep in mind that SharePoint 2016 does user profiles a little differently, and so you may not need to bring that over. So research that a little bit, but it will come over. And then finally, search. You have several search databases. The only ones that will come over, or the only one that will come over, is your search administration database, and that's the one that has all your settings, your listing of content sources and stuff like that. You can't bring the property store database or any of that over because that all intertwines with your index, and you're not bringing your index over. And if you did, they would have to be, down to the millisecond in sync, or it would trigger a full crawl. It probably won't be. So all you can bring over is that search administration page. But that's how you bring your service apps over and how you upgrade those. I don't see any new questions in the question room. All right, so good. Tony, does Shane always cause trouble? Yeah, so Shane Young, for those of you that haven't had the pleasure, was a guy that I used to present with a lot, and he is not very smart and caused a lot of trouble. The good news about that is Shane no longer does SharePoint, so he's no longer a thorn in my side, a monkey wrench in all of my productivity. All right, I promised to talk about my sites, and here's the slide about that. So Your My Sites will upgrade their content databases and all that. So yes, they will upgrade. But the question you need to step back and ask is, should you upgrade them? Are your users using them? Chances are they are. And if that's cool, great, upgrade them. But if not, don't worry about them. And so bring that up. Take a look at that and see if you need to do that or not. Another piece of hybrid functionality that's been added is your users' My Sites are also known as OneDrive for Business. That's where that's at. Starting with Service Pack 1 in SharePoint 2013 and continuing in RTM SharePoint 2016 is the ability to move the OneDrive for Business or the My Sites from On-Prem to Office 365. And so you obviously need an Office 365 license for every user that does this, not for everybody, but every user that does it, and you can control it, and I think I've got a blog post on this as well. They need a license. You do need to figure out authentication. The good news is that's pretty simple. You just basically need to use Azure AD Connect to sync your users up, get those out into Office 365 and all that. In reality, while this may seem like black magic that all this is happening, really all it's doing is it's changing the OneDrive link for people. It's just an audience that changes where that OneDrive link goes. Instead of going to the on-prem location, it goes to Office 365. So here is what the stick on that is. The content is not migrated when you do this. So again, all it's doing is changing that link. So the on-prem OneDrive for Business location is still valid. You can still manually go there if you can type it into your browser. So your users can move their content over. They can open things in Explorer view and lasso things and move it over, or they can use a third-party tool. But that is a good idea, and the moving the OneDrive for Business out into the cloud has some benefits. Obviously, you don't have to store it. You don't have to fuss with it. It gives people the opportunity to get to it easily on their phones, things like that. Wade Anderson threw a question in the chat room. Sounds like the search upgrade doesn't include customizations to the schema, crawled managed properties. Is that correct? So it does include those in the administration database. So the administration database includes things like managed properties. So you're gonna, and I'm going to tell you, for a lot of things, certainly ask questions, and I don't mean to discourage that. But for a lot of these things, when I don't know the answer to them, I just try them. So Wade, you probably have a SharePoint 2016 farm somewhere, or you will soon. Just take that, throw some stuff in 2013, throw some managed properties, things like that, back it up, drop it in 2016, and see what happens. That's the best way that things. Okay, let's move on. So we talked about this a little bit, SharePoint 2010, 2013, and 2016. Actually, before that, let's go back to this. The last bit on this was use a third-party tool, and now that I'm thinking about my slides, I don't think I have a good slide on this. So when should you use a third-party tool? This is an important discussion, and I'm ashamed that I don't have a slide for it. I've forgotten to put that in. We spent most of the last hour talking about what the out-of-the-box upgrade options are. Database attached, you attach your databases, your site collections are upgraded, all that kind of stuff, and we've got a whole bunch more stuff to talk about with that. But sometimes that's not going to work. Sometimes, and I'm talking 2013 to 2016, sometimes there are some reasons why that's not going to work for you very well, and those are the times to use a third-party tool. One of the times to use a third-party tool is if you've got one of those special little snowflakes. So we all have those users in our organization, power users probably, that were one of the first people to realize that SharePoint Designer was free, or front page back in the day, and they've gone in there and just customized SharePoint within an inch of its life. They've they've got things outside of web part zones, and they've got JavaScript on the page that has snowflakes that follow the cursors and all that kind of stuff. And good for them, because they're the SharePoint champions. They are the people to stand up for SharePoint in meetings when somebody says, we're going to put that in SharePoint, and everybody's like, SharePoint. It's that special snowflake that says, SharePoint's awesome. They're our champions. They're good people. The problem, though, is that customizations are the number one killer of upgrades. Not the customizations are bad, but just they make upgrades more painful. If everybody used an out-of-the-box team site for SharePoint, upgrades would be smooth, but that's just not the reality. So what I like to do when I'm talking to customers about upgrading and what their plan looks like, I give them that speech, very impassioned, and then I say, you know, we all know who those are. You can all point to, you know, Fred in accounting or whoever that does all that. Before migration, I start planning that out and I start moving my site collections into databases based on how much trouble they're going to be at upgrade. So if I've got a bunch of site collections that I know they're going to upgrade without any trouble, they start going into one group of content databases. And then when the upgrade actually happens, I do those with the out-of-the-box database attached, and they just work, and life goes on. But then I also have another database where I have all the special little snowflakes, and that database will not be attached because it isn't going to upgrade because of whatever. But those are the site collections that I'm probably going to use a third-party tool with. So the third-party tools are great, and they are amazing. I am a big fan of one from a company called ShareGate. They're a North American company out of Montreal up here. That's the one that I use. They are great, but they have two downsides. Number one is the complexity. It's just more manual work for you when you upgrade with a third-party tool. You don't just dump a database on and everything upgrade and everybody happy. You've got to click and drag and all these kind of things. And so it's more work. And if the content doesn't require it, it's kind of a waste of time to go to that work. The other problem the third-party tools have is they're not free. The out-of-the-box upgrade is free. It just happens. Third-party tools are not free. Not ridiculously priced and certainly worth it when you need them, but they're not free. So my approach to this, my strategy is always to not do everything with out-of-the-box and try to fix everything later, and not do everything with a third-party tool and spend too much time and effort and spend too much money, but to break my upgrades up and do what makes the most sense for each. So as much out of the box as I can, and then as much as I can with third-party tools. And that seems to have been a good plan. So that works for the OneDrive for Business, that works for content databases, that works for all of it. The other great thing about these tools is they've all got good demos, so you can try them and see what works best for you. All right, so we talked about this before, 2010, 2013, and 2016. None of them can exist on the same server as another. 2010 and 2013 databases only have to be at RTM or later to upgrade. With previous versions of SharePoint, like to upgrade SharePoint 2007 to 2010, you had to have Service Pack 2. And for some people, that was a problem because they didn't want to put Service Pack 2 on because of custom or stability issues. And again, you'll probably need more hardware because of the new functionality. Let's go to the next slide. Come on, there we go. Quick notes. So good question. Victor Morales is asking, should we install the latest CU for SharePoint 2016? Not necessarily. So I have, for the last 3 versions of SharePoint, kept track of all of the patches that come out. And so you can go to toddklindt.com/SP2013 builds for the 2013 builds list, toddklindt.com/SP2016 builds for the SharePoint 2016 builds list, so on and so forth. Every patch that has come out for SharePoint 2010, 2013, or 2016 in the past 6 years has been some good with the bad. So I never tell anybody to install the latest CU just because it's out there. It's not a race. I imagine very few of you sit around the pub and compare SharePoint build versions with your buddies and try to look cool. When you install a CU, you have to understand that it might break something. So I'm never going to tell somebody to install a CU because it's the latest, but I will tell them to install a CU if it adds something that they need. So Victor, the answer to your question is you should install that cumulative update if it fixes something that will impact you or if it adds some functionality that you need, but otherwise don't sweat it. Okay, so here is another one of those things that Todd screwed up. Always in your new farm, add your managed paths before you attach your databases. So managed paths, that's in your config database, which is one that you can't bring over, so you're going to lose those in your 2013 farm. But managed paths are your way of telling SharePoint, here be site collections. SharePoint URLs are long, and they've got a part that's the server name, and a part that's the managed path, and a part that's the site collection name, and a part that's the web name, and a part that's the document library name, and all these pieces. So the managed path is how you tell SharePoint this part of the URL is site collection. Take this part, now start looking in site maps and these kind of things. So you have two types of managed paths. You have explicit managed paths, which tells SharePoint, here be a single site collection. And you have wildcard managed paths, which tells SharePoint, here be many site collections. What will happen if you don't add your managed paths to 2016 before you attach your databases is SharePoint 2016 will grab your database and start walking through all of the site collections. And it will start trying to figure out where in its managed path structure that site collection goes. And if it doesn't see a wildcard managed path that matches the URL that that site collection has in the database, it will create an explicit managed path for you. Very accommodating of SharePoint, very nice. And the good news is it all works. So you have no idea when you do your testing, your UAT or whatever, that there was anything wrong, because SharePoint just does the thing that makes it work. The bad news is later when you start creating new site collections, that wildcard managed path is not there. So you can't just dump another site collection in, your sales wildcard or whatever. You have to create explicit managed paths for every site collection you create in there, which is kind of a pain and doesn't scale well. The bad news beyond that is that there is somewhat of a performance penalty a little bit. Every request that comes into SharePoint, every page view, gets banged against that list to find out where it's at in the managed path structure, if it's a site collection or what. So you want that list to be as short as possible. So the good news is, if you do this and you see this problem, the fix is kind of cumbersome but pretty easy. What you need to do is detach all of your content databases, delete all of your managed paths, and I would use PowerShell for that, recreate them, and then reattach your databases, and that will fix it. Chris Hahn is asking, can 2016 handle more managed paths than 2013 can? Maybe, that's tough. I don't know. With 2003 or 2007, one of those two, I made the mistake of having too many managed paths, and I could actually feel that pain. I mean, I could tell that I'd added too many, and I'd added 40 or 50 at that point. I haven't done that mistake in 2013 or 2016, so I don't know if it handles it better or not. Matthew Marino asking a good question. Is it not best practice now to use host name site collections instead of managed paths? That depends, though I'm glad that you're asking that, because that means you're staying up, you're reading on things. Host name site collections mean you have a site collection where the host, so hr.company.com, is the thing that is unique, as opposed to going to portal.company.com/sites/hr. I will tell you that host name site collection support in SharePoint 2013 and 2016 is very good, far better than it was in previous versions of SharePoint, and it's actually something that's probably ready for prime time now. I will also tell you that the reason that it is there is for Office 365. It is there for Microsoft, and so that's why it gets as much attention as it does, and that's why it works as well as it does. Just because it's good for Office 365, an environment with millions of tenants and all that kind of stuff, doesn't mean that it's the best solution for you. So check it out, take a look at it. Again, it's completely viable at this point, but it might not make the most sense for you. There are issues, wildcard SSL certs and all kinds of things to keep in mind, but it does work. I use it a lot. Okay, so then, so always do that. So the next thing, always upgrade the database with the root site collection of your web app first. So every web app has a site collection whose name is just /. It's the root of the web app. You want to get that one in SharePoint 2016 first. The reason for that is because there are a lot of, we've seen these virtual paths that are in IIS, VTI bin and all these kind of things. There are a few little nooks and crannies inside of SharePoint where SharePoint is lazy, and instead of trying to figure out what its actual content context and location is. It just says slash to find that virtual directory. It can get very confused if there's not a site collection there because those virtual directories don't exist. So upgrade that database first so that that site collection exists when everything else is there. Now, the obvious question that comes from that is, but Todd, what if I don't want to upgrade that slash site collection? What if that thing is ugly as tarnation? It's got 300 links on it to every website in our company. It's horrible. We're going to rebuild it. I just can't even imagine upgrading that, let alone upgrading it first. So that's good thinking. You don't want to upgrade something that isn't good. You want to rebuild it if you should. In that case, then my recommendation is just creating a new 2016 site collection at slash. So just a team site, blank site, whatever, and then upgrading, adding your databases. As long as there's something at slash, you're going to be okay. Right, and then just for your edification, version 14 is 2010, 15, 2013. Finally, we're at parity. 16, version 16 of SharePoint is version 2016. So now we have this, everything's in line. SharePoint 2013 lets you create SharePoint 2010 site collections. For 2016 upgrades, that's not a big deal. I thought I hid this slide. Don't worry about this one if you're going from 2013 to 2016. Kind of a waste of time. Sorry about that. Oh, and here's why, because the next one. Okay, so we talked about the Office Web Apps earlier. We're going to talk about them some more. This is the Office Web Apps, Office Online Server. You may also see them referred to as the WACs, the Web Application Components. That was one of the early names. This is the in-browser, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote, all of that. If you take one thing away, it's the first bullet point. They are awesome, and you need them. In 2013. So what do they do for you? Why do you need them? Am I being bribed by the Office Online Server team to say that? Absolutely not. I believe every word of this. They add so much great functionality. They are included with your license if you are, if you've got an Enterprise Cal or whatever enterprise license, it's probably included for you. So there's no licensing cost. They do need to be on their own separate hardware, so there is some cost to that. But they give you the ability to view and edit Office documents in the browser, so that's nice. You don't have to have Word installed everywhere or whatever. The other thing that they do is they give you great previews inside of SharePoint. So you can hover over a Word doc and a document library, and if you've got the Office Online servers hooked up to your farm, you can get a preview in a little pop-up window will pop up with the Word document. You can sift through it. Same with Excel, all that great stuff. The other thing is, again, any of your other Microsoft servers, Exchange, Skype for Business, and all that, can also use them, can use the same farm, the same Office Web App farm. So like that. So Brett Cartwright is asking, so if we don't do Office Online Server, Excel services will break? In 2016, yes, because Excel services is part of Office Online Server. Yes, and Jeremy Taylor brings up another interesting thing. Office Online Server give you the durable links in SharePoint 2016 that give you a link that will always work for a document. So stand them up, and again, even if you don't have it stood up as the SharePoint guy, there's a good chance that somebody else in your environment does if they run Exchange or whatever. Office Web Apps require you to use claims authentication. If you're moving from 2013 to 2016, you're probably already there, but if not, you need to do that. Wade Anderson is like, did you just say that a single Office Web App server can be shared between multiple farms? Yeah, you can do that. Dev, prod, all that. Yes, yeah, you can do that. Now, for performance reasons and maybe network security reasons, you might not want to, but technically, yeah, it works. Requires a separate license. You're probably licensed for it, but check it out. And again, Office Online Server is required for Excel services in SharePoint 2016. Touched on it a little bit in that previous slide, but authentication is a big piece in 2016. Claims, you got to move to claims. If you're holding over Classic from 2010 and 2013, now's the time to make peace with that and to say your goodbyes. You need to get out of Classic. All the cool things require claims. You'll notice that a lot of functionality, Office Web Apps, for instance, workflows, are all finding themselves on separate servers, and because of that, you need some kind of authentication mechanism that can hop servers, and that is claims. So Classic is required for all of those things. If you've got a Classic database and you're moving it either from 2010 to 2013 or 2013 to 2016, I recommend converting it after you upgrade it. The reason for that is a semantic kind of thing, a pedantic thing. The farm that you are adding the database to when you do your upgrade is likely a test farm of some variety. If everything gets destroyed in that farm, you're probably okay. But the database, or the farm that you're bringing it from, where your database is Classic, another name for that farm is production. And if something happens when you convert that database from Classic to claims and everything explodes, you've exploded it in production. And I don't like to do that. So go ahead and do that when you bring it over. The tools are better, the tools in 2013 are better than they are in 2010. The tools in 2016 are better than they are in 2013, so you're better off doing it there. When you do that convert, there are two things that happen. One of them is that the web app itself, its authentication mechanism is changed, IIS changes, things like that. The second thing is SharePoint essentially does a find with replace in the content database and says, find the Classic version of Todd, the domain / username or / username, and replace it with the claims version, the : bang w blah blah hash. So then if you do that and you add more databases, if you have multiple Classic databases, you can just run the conversion multiple times. So bring the Classic database in, the second one, the third one, whatever, and run the convert again. It will notice that the web app is already converted, and it will not convert that again, but it will convert your new databases. So you're good there. And finally, start thinking about Azure Active Directory. And so this is not specifically an on-prem authentication method. You can kind of do it, but it's ugly as all heck. I don't recommend it. But you're going to start moving to the cloud, maybe not this year, but it's going to happen. And getting your users in Azure Active Directory and getting that Azure Active Directory Connect set up to sync, or maybe even adding federation, that's something to start thinking about now, and that will impact how things go. SharePoint 2013 can federate well, but it can't actually use Azure AD for authentication very easily. There are some hacks that do it. It's ugly, so you probably don't want to do that, but you may end up federating using ADFS and doing that. Wade Anderson is asking, are claims or Azure AD dependent on Kerberos? No, thank goodness they are not. Not that Kerberos is so bad now, those tools have also gotten a lot better too. All right, so what does it look like when you attach a database? So I will cop to the fact that this screenshot is from 2013. I forgot to replace this with a 2016 screenshot, but the thing is the same. You can run, after your database has been copied to your SharePoint 2016 SQL instance, your permissions have been fixed. You can go to SharePoint 2016, you can run test SB content database, give SharePoint the name of the database and the web app to which you want to attach it. And then what SharePoint will do is it will walk through that content database and look for issues. This is not a mandatory step, though you're silly if you don't do it, so I recommend this to all of my friends and even my enemies. You always want to test your content database. The reason you have to give it the web app is because different web apps have different features and solutions and all that, so it needs to look at that. The other thing I will tell you to take away from these objects is you'll notice that the third line down is upgrade blocking false. Much like the advice I gave Wade earlier about trying search and just doing it. When I do a test SB content database, if I see a bunch of non-upgrade blocking errors and it's nothing that I know the immediate fix to, I just attach it and see what happens. It's the American equivalent of saying, hold my beer, and then trying something. Just attach it. And if it doesn't work, you detach it. You restore your backup again, and you try it again. But you can do that. And then if everything looks good, then the command to attach it, instead of being test SB content database, you've got upgrade SB content database, and then it upgrades it. So here is how you create databases in classic mode and test for those. That's all out there. I can provide you this content. You'll get the slides, all that kind of business. Pre-upgrade check doesn't exist anymore. That's an old holdover from SharePoint 2007. Test SP content does a lot. Before you run test SP content database, do a help on it and see all the switches. There are switches for things like, show me the web that it's in, things like that. So check all those out. You can't hurt by trying those. Features and solutions. We had a question about this earlier. When you're upgrading, there's two pieces of this. Number one of my Todd's axioms of upgrading is don't upgrade crap. And that crap can be content, that can be site collections that you're not using and you don't need. That crap can also be features or solutions that you installed with every good intention of using them and just never did. And so now is a good time when you're doing your upgrade. It doesn't really matter whether that feature or solution works in 2016. The first thing you should ask yourself is, do I need it? Does SharePoint 2016 do this out of the box? Should I just, and then if you do decide that you need it, then look and see if there's a better way to work it. Again, the question isn't, will it work with no modifications in 2016? You should ask yourself, is there a better way to do this with the app model or something else like that? Now is the time, again, to save yourself from some of those sins of the past. 2010 stuff mostly works in 2013. 2013 stuff mostly works in 2016, but again, do yourself a favor and check it out. If you installed everything as WSPs, you can just install them in your new farm. I recommend doing that before you upgrade your databases. Get all those WSPs in place. And then Shane has an old blog post that talks about how you can run some PowerShell on your 2010 or 2013 farm and extract all of your WSPs if you don't have them saved somewhere, because they are just blobs in your config database. One thing that I think I didn't talk about earlier, when I was talking about the third-party tools, I talked about how you can use them to bring over the special snowflakes and all that. The other thing that you can use them for is if you have site collections that should have been multiple site collections, if you have big site collections that you wish you could break up, upgrading and then using a third-party tool is a great way to fix that. The converse of that is if you have webs that you think should all be a site collection, you can use a third-party tool to collapse them all into one big site collection. Kevin Graham asks, any gotchas for RBS or Blob Store? Heck yeah. That's something you got to take up with your RBS vendor, because all you can attach is databases. So you need to figure out how to upgrade RBS. That's all on them. Every RBS provider is going to be a little different. The worst case scenario is you'd have to rehydrate all of your content out of RBS back into your content databases, and that would be horrible. So contact your RBS vendor early and often about that. Upgraded database, test, mount, we talked about that. Mount the database, you'll notice they're exactly the same. So I run the test, I up arrow, I replace test with mount and do that. That's pretty easy. So those commands that we ran are the same as going from 2010 to 2013. There's an upgrade log for each upgrade that's run, which makes your troubleshooting a lot easier. 2016 logs, 2015, 16/logs, 15/logs, depending on which version you're doing. You can still mount multiple databases at the same time, so you can have multiple PowerShell windows open and mount multiple databases. The bottleneck for that is SQL.io, so that's what you want to take a look at. SQL.io. Look and feel are upgraded automatically. That was the whole 2010 to 2013 thing. I need to fix that slide. All right, don't worry about, so there's some stuff. These are old upgrade stuff. There is a lot of good things on TechNet, and Channel 9, also MSDN's got a bunch of great things on that. For the last couple of minutes here, we will do QA. I've got a bunch of questions in here I will try to catch. Chris Edwards asks, do I recommend Kerberos? No, I mean, Kerberos isn't bad, but I only recommend Kerberos in places where you need it. Over the years, people have had discussions about whether Kerberos is faster, more secure, things like that. Kerberos adds a level of complexity. Make sure you're getting something from it. Eric Kirkpatrick is asking, how does ADFS work with SharePoint 2016? What version of ADFS is required? I think the most recent version, and I'll be honest, I haven't done much with that, but it works okay. I mean, it's got all the ADFS hiccups to it when you're bouncing things around, but it's certainly, if it's something that will help you, certainly consider it. Bruce is asking a question. I have a web app, App 1. I have 2 sites under App 1, Site 1 and Site 2. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss story. How do I migrate App 1/Site 1 and keep App 1/Site 2 on my SharePoint 2013 server, preserving URLs? Oh boy, you know, I'm not sure how you would do that. You could potentially use IIS redirection and do it that way and redirect to a different URL. There used to be a way with SharePoint 2007 or 2010 with STS-ADM, you could create a web app with a redirect URL where SharePoint would try to find, in this case, Site 2 on your new server, and if it couldn't find it, it would send it back to your old server. I don't know. Bruce, reach out to me on that one, and we'll talk through that, see if I can help you. Sean is asking, where can we get the PowerPoint deck for this and all of the links? Sean, you can email me, todd.klindt@rackspace.com or at Todd Klindt on Twitter, and I'll get them out there for you. I'll end up putting them on my blog or something for that. Rick is asking, have they added native user lookup for ADFS yet? I don't believe so, and that's not so much an ADFS issue as that's a external authentication provider, but I haven't checked that. I think you can write third-party things that do that, but I haven't done that. Let's go up. I got some old questions I want to make sure that I answer. And I don't want to delete them. Joe's asking, do I have any good reference for building SharePoint 2016 in Azure for testing and upgrading and learning? I don't know that I do. I would tell you there's a guy, Kirk Evans at Microsoft. He's I don't know what he is. He's been doing a bunch of stuff. We've been doing it at Rackspace. We support SharePoint on Azure. I don't know what all resources are out there, though. We've kind of been doing it ourselves, and I'm not sure what's out there. If anybody's got any, shout them out. Goodness, more questions. We're coming down to the last few minutes, and I'm not going to get all these questions answered. Again, let me pop to my vanity slide, and you can see my my contact information. I don't know if there's a way for me to go directly to that here. But don't be afraid at all to shout out to me. There's my contact information. If I can help you, I'm happy to help you. If I don't know, I'm also happy saying I don't know. But by all means, don't be shy. I do want to say, as we're winding this down, thanks to the folks at Acceleradio. They bring us SP.Kit. If you're not using SP.Kit, shame on you, especially in the context of upgrade. SP.Kit is a great way to see what's going on in your farm and start planning things. There's all kinds of tools around SP.Kit, exporting things and all that. So check out SP.Kit at sp.kit.com, and they've got a demo you can do and all that. But thanks for Tony for reaching out to me. Tony and I have known each other forever. The SP.Kit story is kind of funny. When SharePoint 2010 came out, I jumped into PowerShell and was going to write a great PowerShell script that did a farm audit and audited all of the things and stuff like that. And I remember that was about the time that Tony came out with SP.Kit. And I remember thinking, I'm not even going to look at that dumb thing because I can do all this in PowerShell and I don't need Tony's tool. And then hung out with Tony a little bit at the MVP summits, and people were raving about SP.Kit, and I was all very begrudging, and I went back to my hotel room and I loaded up SP.Kit and I ran it on the farm, and I'm like, I am an idiot. I should have been running this all along. SP.Kit's a great tool, so definitely check that out. Already getting emails asking for the slides, so that is awesome. You guys are on top of it. Matt wants to ask what I've done to get kicked out of the Bill Bear fan club. Bill Bear is a senior product manager at Microsoft for SharePoint or Office 365 or something. I've known Bill forever, 10 years or whatever. One funny thing about that, Bill was born in Germany. He lives in Seattle and all that. His wife, though, grew up about an hour away from me, and we know some of the same people. And so I always tell him how great Iowa is, and that's why he's kicked me out of the Bill Bear fan club. Brett is asking for good podcasts, touting all the new beautiful things we must have in 2016. Brett, I've got my own podcast, and I talk about it there, but if there's any specific things, if you haven't gone out and looked for the Future of SharePoint event that happened a month ago in San Francisco, check that out. They talk about a bunch of things there. A lot of Office 365 things, I'll be honest, but there's a lot of great SharePoint on-prem things. One of the things that they're going to do with 2016 is for people with enterprise agreements, they're going to release feature packs, and their goal is to more quickly bring the new Office 365 SharePoint Online features to us on-prem folks. And so that's one of the big things. On-prem SharePoint has a lot of life left in it. Don't think otherwise. You've got a lot of years left. Keith Greenwood says in the chat room, Todd rocks. Well, thanks. I can only assume that Keith Greenwood is a nom de plume for my mother, but you're not so bad yourself, Keith. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. Time to wrap up, folks. I was just getting warmed up, but this was a great time. Again, thanks to Tony and the folks at sp.kit. And again, don't be shy. Hit me up on email. It's up on the screen there. And I'm going to be over in Europe. I notice a lot of folks here in Europe. I'm going to be in Europe in October up in Stockholm at the SharePoint Exchange Forum that Jorn Huisman puts on. For goodness sakes, if you are going up there, and you should, it's a great conference, come find me. I'm a really friendly guy. Come introduce yourself, and I would love to chat with you. Otherwise, I'm going to be at SPTechCon here in the U.S., hopefully Ignite in the fall in September. But again, very friendly, so come up and introduce yourself. I would love to chat with you. SP.kit folks, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. And everybody else, thanks. I appreciate your attention, and hopefully I'll be seeing you again.